America votes in exactly 3 weeks. Tomorrow, Kamala Harris will do something Democratic candidates rarely do. She's going to sit down for her first ever one-on-one interview with Fox News. She's going to appear on Special Report with Brett Baier, and Reuters is also reporting her campaign is in talks with Joe Rogan about appearing on his podcast, showing up some of that male voter support. The Joe Rogan Experience is the most listened to podcast in the United States. It has an audience in the tens of millions. Donald Trump indicated yesterday he'll be on the podcast sometime before voting day on November the 5th. Following this so very closely is my next guest. He is Canadian, let's make that clear right off the hopper, born and raised in Toronto, but he has had a tremendous success in American media with CNN and now the chief correspondent of MSNBC. And he's back in Toronto for a special book event today. Welcome, Ali Velshi, friend of the program.
Thank
it's great
you.
to see you.
It's great to be back with you, my old friend.
And listen, we want to talk about all of the things I just mentioned by way of introduction in terms of the election I want to get to. But there's your new book, Small Acts of Courage.
Yep.
The intersection of history with 125 years of your family history. And tonight in Toronto on the stage at Kerner Hall, you're going to be talking about this. What's your main message that's going to be to that audience?
It's timely. It's a message about a world in which things feel overwhelming. We're overwhelmed by the existential challenges we face, whether it's democracy in the United States or it's war in Russia and Ukraine and Israel, Palestine, climate. My book is about sticking to what you are able to do, possibly just in the community around you, and making things better. And in that way, you make democracy better. You leave it better than you found it. You feel a little accomplished. It's the answer and the salve to the fact that it's too big out there. It's too overwhelming to try and boil the ocean and think you can solve all problems. So I've used my family history and history over that time, the last 125 years, to show that some of the biggest change makers that we've encountered in the last 125 years started with a small project and in some ways ended up changing the world.
Fantastic. It's going to be an excellent talk. And the themes that you just highlighted there, democracy and freedom, the fight for both.
Yep.
These are, of course, central messages in the U.S. election that you're covering so closely. As I mentioned, 3 weeks today.
Yep.
The polls couldn't be tighter, particularly in these 7 battleground states. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, it's weird that the polls are that tight. It's 7 battleground states, and if you look at it nationally, they are in a dead heat, a statistical dead heat. You might see polls that show one higher or lower, but within the margin of error, this is a dead heat. There are very few undecided voters left in the United States. This is an issue of who's going to turn out to vote. Kamala Harris has constituencies that are not enthused about her. You talked about going on Joe Rogan's show. She's struggling with men. The gender divide here is great. We are probably going to see remarkable support for women for Kamala Harris, A, because she's a woman, B, because a lot of Democratic women are voting on the issue of reproductive rights, and some Republican women are too. On the other hand, white men are supporting Donald Trump. Now, they are what you call low propensity voters. They don't tend to turn out to vote. So in both campaigns' cases, they are going after voters who, if they were to vote, would likely vote for them, but you need to get them out to vote. For the moment, it's advantage Harris because she's got a bigger operation. She's been raising a lot of money. She raised more money in the last couple of months than Donald Trump did all year. Yeah, $1 billion. That helps you get people out to get the vote out. So that's the issue here. This is a get out the vote operation. We're also not going to know a result 3 weeks from tonight. This is probably going to be fought out in some courts. And as you know, any court that makes a decision is going to probably go to the Supreme Court. So like the year 2000, this may be an election that is in some fashion decided about the votes in one particular state. Maybe it's Georgia, maybe it's Pennsylvania, decided by the Supreme Court. So don't expect a quick result.
All right. Well, that sets things up. You also mentioned something about ground game I want to ask you about in just a moment, but you mentioned Joe Rogan. With things as tight as they are, here we have Kamala Harris appearing on Fox tomorrow night and then contemplating going on Joe Rogan. There must be untold risks for her, or not untold. I want to ask you what you think the risks would be of those kind of interviews and why she would take on those risks.
So they're risky, but I remind you, she was a prosecutor. She was a United States senator, and she's been vice president for 4 years. So she's better armed than people who know her from the past think, number one. Number two, she's going on with Brett Baier. If you're a Democrat who's going to do an interview on Fox News on the big channel, Brett Baier is the guy you want to talk to. Brett's a friend. Brett and I have covered things for for a long time. He is a fair journalist. He is fair and tough when he interviews Donald Trump. He will be fair and tough when he interviews Kamala Harris. So I think that's a good plan. Joe Rogan will get her some of that exposure to men. We're not quite sure what this is, whether men are feeling sort of left behind in the process or taken advantage of by Democrats, or whether there's something else at play here. Barack Obama was implying that it might be men not wanting to vote for a woman. But whatever the case is, the only way to fight this if you're a candidate is to try and get access to the audience that may not be voting for you and convince them to come out for you. She does tend to do well in these performances. She tends to go out there and leave relatively unscathed. I think that's what's going to happen.
We're seeing that certainly on all sorts of appearances from The View right on through. Ground game.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your take on the Donald Trump-Elon Musk relationship because Trump has brought him on to be in charge of his ground game and help get out the vote. How do you see that relationship, and how do you see Elon Musk fitting in with the Trump equation?
Well, Elon Musk has decided that he's got several investigations going on by several arms of the government. Some of them have to do with SpaceX, some of them have to do with Tesla. So there seems to be some self-interest here in having Donald Trump elected. Donald Trump really likes him, says he's going to give him a government position. I'm not sure why Elon Musk should be running your ground game. I think he's a really smart guy. He's doing enough for Donald Trump by adjusting algorithms on X that allow Donald Trump supporters to get a lot of traction. But he apparently is moving to Pennsylvania. Apparently he's all involved in this stuff. I'm not clear on what it is Elon Musk is going to do for Donald Trump on the ground. He's doing enough for Donald Trump behind the scenes, but there's a lot of money going from Trump to Musk. There's a real nexus between some of these tech bros and the Trump campaign. They don't want to be regulated. The Biden administration has a woman at the Federal Trade Commission, Lena Khan, the chair, who's been very aggressive on antitrust stuff. Tech companies don't want that. There's a connection between J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, a tech investor. So there's a lot of tech money going into the Trump campaign. Like big oil in the past or big pharma or cigarettes, they want to avoid what they think of as the likely coming regulation of the tech sector and the tech industry, and that's where their interests correspond.
So how long are you in Canada? Because I'm hoping you might have time to come back.
There's a lot of travel going on in the next few weeks, so unfortunately,
because I got a lot more questions for you.
I'll be on a real early flight out tomorrow, but you know I always love it, and I always come back, and we're an hour away, so if you want me on the show, I will come here specifically
Ali,
to be on with you.
It is an interesting time, and your perspective on it is so interesting to hear. Thanks for the time. And again, small acts of courage. If you happen to be in Toronto at Kerner Hall tonight, 7 o'clock until 8:30, and a good read as well. Come back anytime.
Nice to see you, friend.
Nice to see you, too. Thanks, Ali Velshi.
All right.